Hello, my name is Peter. I'm showcasing my project-based learning that I've created for a class of freshman biology students. At this point in time, this kind of takes place towards the end of a unit or a lesson series on the hierarchical organization of like cells to tissues to organs and so forth there. And it's kind of also hitting some key ideas of structure and function and those intertwining systems. But so to start out, the students are presented with this page here of the story, which is the problem at hand. Is there is this 17-year-old student named Dakota who is an active student in his classes. He has a Native American background, and he is eventually diagnosed with stage 2 esophageal cancer. And so with that, as they navigate here, there's the big question at hand, which is how does the malfunction of the esophagus affect structure and function of the digestive system, and what can be done to restore normal body function? And so heavy emphasis on that second one there, but that preliminary question is essential to it as well. But so if you go up here, we have our story, we have our research, we have our assessment. Within the story tab, there's your tasks and roles of the students themselves. And so this puts them in the shoes of the medical team who has recently diagnosed our student, and they're working on creating a solution to treat his esophageal cancer. And with that as well, with the goal is not just trying to, save this kid's life, but also trying to allow him to live as much of a continued normal lifestyle as possible. And so the students are then given specific roles within their medical research team that they'll get to choose, and that kind of dictates their strong suits when creating their product by the end there. But so I showcase what the different roles are. I've got the head doctor. It's kind of the leader of the group there, someone that will make executive decisions so that way they don't have paralysis and get stuck on something for too long. There's the surgeon, who's kind of like the artist person of the group there, but they also have some responsibilities in background research. We've got the nurse, who is all about evaluating pros and cons and really getting into the fact that he's coming from a Native American background and that there's probably some apprehensiveness to Western medicine. And then there's the PR lead, who is usually kind of the person that's going to read the slides, but it's also their job to make sure that the slides flow well, and that what's being presented makes sense, because this isn't just a presenting it to the class. You're presenting it to the class as if you were assuming they are Dakota's family, and you're trying to convince them that this is what we should do, this is what we're going to do, and here's why. But so with that, I have on the site linked a group organizer, which will help walk them through the process slowly. But they're first told to do this day one stuff, which they're going to fill out their group members' names, their table numbers, their hour, all that stuff. And it has, what do they know about esophagus? What do they know about cancer? What do they know about the connections between those and the connection between body systems? And then based off the background, what are some things where they don't necessarily know it yet, but what might they need to know? Okay, well, I know cancer is bad, but what does it actually do? Or cancer of the esophagus, is that what smokers get, or is that something else? Because lung cancer is very different from esophageal cancer. And they're coming up with a hypothesis of, okay, just from first instincts here, let's get the ball rolling on an idea of a solution. It doesn't have to be a correct solution, and it's just something to spitball an idea out there, so that way they're again kind of getting past that decision paralysis of it. And so they'll start this within 20 minutes left of class remaining there, and they'll spend time as a group writing down this planning phase here that I have, and then they will decide on their group roles that they're going to carry out over the next 2 or so days that they continue to work on this in class with the last 20 minutes. And so this should all be done by the end of that first day there. You should, as a teacher, be walking around kind of assessing this and going, okay, what do my students know, and what are they trying to figure out? What are some thoughts? And then again, kind of getting some early ideas on who's going to be fulfilling what roles and how accountable you need to keep them. Going back to the webpage here, is now that they've gotten this first part done, it kind of moves into that research phase, which you'll bring up to them on day 2 when you then release them for time to work on it. And so clicking on just the top there, let me interject this real quick, is that clicking on the tabs themselves bring you to the main part, and then they have a separate drop-down tab as well. So going to start the research there, it's just a very simple thing saying, hey, you're all going to collectively fill out a group research doc, which is the same thing that's been previously listed. And with that, let me go back here. They'll need to have completed some background research, and that is what they're filling out in the Google Doc. Who would have guessed? And some of those key ideas there that they'll need to be looking into is, some background on esophageal cancer, background on structure and function, possible solution, pros and cons. And I also mentioned right here that I already do have one article just to get them started, but we'll look at the student handout once more. It's not actually a handout because it will remain in a digital format, so that way they can, through Google Docs, all work on it simultaneously. There's kind of those key ideas there again with some like, hey, here's information that you found, here's a source. I encourage them to add more boxes, but this is kind of the bare bones of it. And there's also some further guiding questions. And if you've noticed, these are also color coordinated, so roles should be focusing on specific categories, and not saying that they're all pigeonholed or shoehorned into just doing one thing at a time. They should all be working together, but it is a way that's tailored towards, you kind of create experts in each category, and then they explain that to each other. So we've got that, and that is their little research document that they'll work through. And this is the second day here that they'll be working on it. You'll be giving them, again, 20 minutes at the end of class to be like, all right, this time is yours. Let's get some research done. Let's get some progress made on your PBL. And so with those 4 ones that I said, I've got the little starting segments, and it's just that link there, a quick little sentence saying like, hey, this is kind of your role, like, this is why you should be doing it, if you hadn't already, and just kind of highlighting like, hey, once more, this is where that box goes, this is where you should be putting this. So I've got that. I've got the structure and function section, which again goes back to the search in there, and it talks a little bit about how you'll need to know these things that we can model it. Again, I've got the one box, I've got a source here, possible solutions, more of the same. Here's a first source just to kind of get them started. Again, what the box that they're looking for is, heavy emphasis here on like, yes, we want real world solutions, but also like, I'm not against coming up with hypotheticals and creating things here. Part of this is like, oh, well, even though it might not be something now, it might be cutting edge technology or something that is very close to working that just hasn't been implemented yet. So I think that that is a valuable point to make. And then they can double down on that in the rationale section, in which they can put it under like, well, here's some pros and here's some cons. Some pros being like, it has the potential to be really rewarding or really convenient, but it might not be fully developed yet, you know? So that's why I mentioned like, oh, you know, college, I give them some examples of pros and cons here, of like, hey, costs, quality of life afterwards. But again, I bring a lot of emphasis onto the patient's backgrounds and beliefs, because I know not everyone has the same beliefs on like organ transplant or organ donating, and so that would then complicate the situation of what you're going to do to fix the esophagus, or it potentially limits or adds constraints to that there. But with that, they need to do some research on the topic there, and come up with that conclusion on their own, because again, they'll be presenting it to Dakota's family, and this is their first real impression of them. So they're trying to get as much research as they can and approach it in a sensible way in which you're not necessarily trying to convince, but trying to show that you do care in navigating that social space. And then lastly, that third day is once they've gotten all of this research done, they'll really be putting it into a presentation here, which is their form of assessment. They'll be collaboratively making a Google Slides presentation of their proposed solution that they've been working on the past couple days. I just gave a little placeholder of like, oh, the proposed presentation date, but you just change that to whatever it is. Assuming your class has 20 students, that makes 5 groups of 4 students. If a class period's 45 minutes, maybe you get 9 minutes per group, but realistically that cuts it down to probably 7 minutes because, some kids are going to go over, some kids are going to be under. Just assume 7-minute presentation time. I have a big thing here on you're responsible for keeping your group mates accountable, and that's kind of the role of the head doctor as well there. But also to inform the teacher if there are roadblocks, if you have got group members missing or something's not quite going right, like you should be speaking up so that way it's not an excuse by the end of the project. And then I have, hey, just that way like things that should be in your presentation. You should have an introduction slide, like including your group members' names, all that jazz, a little bit of background, a model, rationale, the typical, like any questions at the end slide, and then some works cited. In case they didn't know, I feel like it's standard practice at this point, but I'm just reiterating that so that way these students can see it over and over again and go, okay, here are the things that I need. I'm not going to miss any of them. And then I have a thing here of there will also be a reflective handout sheet. This is a printed out sheet that they will then do on presentation day, just so that way they can self-assess their own accountability and also assess their group mates' accountability. So that way, if you have a more passive student who is adverse to confrontation or doesn't want to be a tattletale, they're still able to potentially explain, hey, we had a slacker in our group and that's why this certain element wasn't as good as it could have been. But like I said, I also think it's a good spot to reassess your own work and then also get to assess some of your classmates' work and go, oh, I like what this group did. So I'll pull up that assessment sheet here as well. That one's not linked on this because it's something that the teacher would print out. But so in assessment, I've got the rubric here for them, also color coordinated, just that way they kind of know whose responsibility it falls under. Granted, again, there are a lot of blurred lines of, okay, like, yes, this says it's for this person, but everyone's kind of working on it a bit. But it should help students realize, okay, this section here is, mine specifically, or primarily the responsibility falls on me. Just so that way there's not so much arguing over who does what and like all that. Again, they have their assigned roles, but I think that the rubric also being color coordinated just kind of emphasizes further like, hey, this is what you will be graded on specifically here, or this is what your group as a whole will be graded on. Here's where some of the faults kind of lie a little bit. I just think it helps with clarity. I like my color coordinating. And then I have my example, a very mediocre example given of what a thing might look like there. We've got our introduction slide, it's the Dakota project, it's by me. We've got a background here on esophageal cancer, not just talking about what it is, but the symptoms and where Dakota is specifically. So there's some emphasis here on like, oh, hey, it's been caught at stage 2, so that's where he is in the progress there, and what stage 2 actually means. And then furthermore, getting into a little bit of the realistic facts of it is there's a 50 to 80% survival rate over the following 5 years following treatment. And that's something that you do need to approach them about. Then I have some background on the esophagus there, and then there's the part of like I said, the surgeon is kind of going to be making a little model of their proposed fix there. This is not a realistic proposition. This is more on the hypothetical end. There's not a whole lot of actual research put into this here, but I have a fake prosthetic or a prosthetic esophagus that they're putting in there, and there's the rationale, which is this should be tailored very closely to the family and making sure that the pros and cons align with them. And then there's the questions and the works cited page, and that's really it for this. Let me see if I can pull up my reflection sheet really quick here. It should just be where's my drive? I've got like just a second here. Reflective sheet. Again, it's just some simple 4 questions of contributing. Did everyone in your group do it? What's a takeaway? And what's something that another group said? And this is something that will be collected for points, but it won't be graded because it's very subjective. Whereas this and their presentation is their summative and will be graded. But so that is my problem-based learning. Thanks.